My name is Isla, and I was born and raised in the little town of Harrow, where everyone knows your identity and nothing has been kept a secret for a long time. I attended college after high school and threw myself right into the retail industry. Selling lingerie in particular, rather than just anything in general, was what I was enthusiastic about. Inspired by this passion, I worked hard and eventually became the owner of a chain of lingerie furniture stores that offered everything from chic items to cozy shops. I was excellent at what I did, and I put my all into it. However, despite my professional success, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. That's when Henry entered the picture. It all started with a simple friend request and ping from a man who, based on his profile picture, looked even sharper and seemed to be wearing a stylish suit. Curiosity led me to fulfill his request, and I soon discovered that he was a lawyer, which accounts for the pricey attire. Henry first reached out to me one evening as I was working on my accounts with a message that was as simple as it was intriguing. He had a knack for making me laugh after long, exhausting days, and his later texts were funny. We talked about anything from superficial topics like poor pickup lines to deeper, more important ones. Conversations with him were the highlight of my day since we shared a terrific sense of humor. In order to put faces to our communications, he suggested that one evening we meet up for a casual coffee date. One of my favorite local cafes, noted for its strong coffee, is where we first met. In person, Henry was even more impressive than his dazzling professional profile. The link was made instantly. In fact, Henry paid attention to everything I said, and we spoke about everything from personal objectives to business matters for hours. After a year of getting to know each other, Henry decided to take our relationship further. He appeared out of the blue one chilly night as I was closing one of my establishments. His breath was visible in the cold air as he carefully held out a small, beautiful box. His eyes were serious as he began to speak, but it was clear that he was nervous about what he was going to say. Together, you and I had been doing well. Recently, it occurred to me that perhaps we should consider committing to a long-term relationship. As I stood there with the keys to the store, Henry proposed to me with that seductive, lopsided smile that always made my heart race. Isla, marry me. The aim is to get right to the point. I want you at my side no matter what. My heart thumped in my chest as a storm of emotions overtook my union. Was I ready? However, everything seemed to be in balance as I peered into his sincere eyes. Yes, I whispered, my voice a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Yes, I will wed you. However, Henry's expression became more serious. There's something else we need to discuss. Henry, really? He threw the word prenup at me like a chilly rain. Is that necessary? He immediately tried to calm me by gently holding my hands to halt my shaking. Isla, trust isn't the issue. It's helpful, especially in light of my legal profession. I've witnessed too many heartbreaking splits to be careless. Keeping us both safe is the primary objective. Which kind of protection is at issue here? I inquired, sounding both interested and worried. Henry extracted some documents from his suitcase. It's simple. If one of us goes in a different direction, the other person gets the assets instead of the cheater. It's fair and straightforward. You know that I would never betray you. This is only a precaution. I took a big breath, attempting to absorb everything. The romantic proposal is now intertwined with the realities of legal problems. The engagement didn't turn out the way I had hoped. However, Henry was always surprised, so this may have been another special time. I looked at the documents, then back at him, and saw his genuine honesty. All right, I'll give it some thought, but I don't want to ever give you a reason to turn this against me, Henry. Just to be clear. I just want that, he said, obviously relieved. We celebrated that night at a lovely restaurant, where the food was good, the atmosphere was perfect, and Henry's charms took my mind off the depths of our conversation for a little while. Later that night, as we walked under the stars, Henry drew me in. You know how much I love you? No document can change that. I placed my head on top of his chest. Henry, I know. I love you too. Just make sure that this prenup doesn't interfere with our relationship. Okay? He kissed my forehead. It won't. Tell me. A few days later, after consulting my own lawyer, I signed the prenuptial agreement. Our relationship was just getting started, so it felt strange to sign something so focused on its potential demise. We were the couple everyone looked up to at parties, always laughing together and whispering in private. But as the months passed, little changes began to show, a slow coldness developing between us that suggested greater problems that had not yet surfaced. I was all in, though, hoping that my trust in Henry was sound because love is a gamble. A few weeks after our shopping trip, I was in a perfume store looking at a variety of fragrances and chatting away with the sales manager about them. Henry was obviously upset when we left, and he asked me a pointed question as we walked out of the crowded mall. "Who is that?" I was perplexed by his tone. "Just the sales guy," I said. I wanted to know about the scents. "Why?" Kurt's response was piercing eyes. "You seem to be genuinely interested in him." He made the accusation. "Are you serious now?" His implication startled me, and I stopped dead in my tracks. "Henry, I was talking about perfumes." "What's wrong with you?" He shook his head and scoffed as we continued our conversation. "Ignore it. Let's just go home." However, that incident marked the beginning of a worrying pattern. Whenever I interacted with other men, Henry grew increasingly jealous and distant, often pouting or saying sarcastic things. At home, he also changed his behavior, becoming more and more withdrawn, frequently absorbed in his phone or laptop, so I had to eat dinner alone most nights. He rubbed his temples and groaned. "You have no idea how much strain I'm under at work, Isla. And it just bothers me when I see you laughing and talking to other men." I went to him in his study one evening because I could no longer bear the growing tension, and I said firmly, "Henry, we need to talk," closing his laptop to get his attention. The heated conversation was fueled by unspoken irritations and hurt feelings, and it became much more problematic when I found out from acquaintances that Henry had been spreading false information about me flirting with other men. "I feel like you don't value our connection enough to avoid us. Have you been talking about me behind my back, Henry?" I went up to him and said, "I'm getting really angry." He made a weak attempt to explain that it wasn't like that, saying I may have spoken, but only because I noticed their gaze on you. "This is unbelievable." I interrupted him in a fit of rage, saying, "It's not your place to spread false information about me." Our relationship calmed down a bit after that heated argument. One morning, I found Henry's message on the kitchen counter. His normally neat handwriting appeared hurried. "Let's try a new beginning, Isla. Tonight, from 9 to 10 p.m. Meet me in room 90 of the Grand View Hotel." It was a hazy day. The night and the possibility of a new beginning filled my thoughts. It was a surprise note. Perhaps he was attempting to make amends. I decided to go with a mix of optimism and anxiety. Is it possible for us to start over? As dusk approached, hope flitted in my chest like a delicate bird daring to fly. Henry became angry the moment I walked into the room and came over to me. When the stray wife finally reappeared, he yelled in a tone full of contempt, "Henry, we must speak!" I pleaded, my voice shaking with anxiety. Something horrible happened tonight, to bridge the gap of miscommunication between us. I implored him, but he was deaf. He made a dramatic motion, slamming a stack of images onto the table and then yelling angrily, "Explain them." I trembled and picked up the pictures, which showed me in a hotel room in a compromising scenario with an unknown man. My heart sank. "I swear, Henry, I've never seen this man before. I've never met him before. Something strange happened tonight that I can't explain," and I muttered in panic as Henry's mocking laugh chilled me to the bone. "The real mistake was marrying," he said cold. My eyes started to water, but I forced myself to remain composed. "This is not what I did. I pleaded with you to believe me." Henry, however, continued, "You believe? Why should I? I'll make sure you don't get any money from me because you are nothing but a liar and a cheater. I'm going to court over this." The sound of his slamming the door behind him echoed through the empty house as he venomously promised, "I will take everything," picked up his already packed luggage, and left with one last sour look. Then I realized it was the wine, and although I had only had one glass, there was no explanation for the extreme lightheadedness and blackout, and I collapsed onto the couch, crying uncontrollably as a searing agony ate into my skull and clouded my judgment, more than just a headache, as if a fog had covered my brain, making the events of the night seem hazy and jumbled. Too awful for that little amount. Desperate to get answers, I called my friend Riley, a nurse. "Something's not right, Riley." After I finished my first glass of wine, everything went dark. Hours later, I woke up and said, "Isla, it sounds like you might have been drugged." Riley responded, "Isla, it sounds like you might have been drugged," after a brief pause. "You should be tested immediately at a lab or hospital. Tell them everything, including the wine and your symptoms." As I drove to the lab in a daze, my mind was racing to piece together the events of the evening. I told the technician about my experience there, and he respectfully took several vials of blood for analysis. A few days later, A heavy letter from Henry knocked on my door, and I opened it with shaking hands, and my suspicions were confirmed. Henry was suing me for infidelity, and the letter, written in a cold, formal style, attempted to deny me everything in line with our prenuptial agreement, and the trial was set for a month from now. In a panic, I called my lawyer, Jacob. "Come to my office, Isla." In a voice that provided some comfort during the chaos, he said, "We need to strategize." As I drove to Jacob's office, every possible scenario, each more terrifying than the last, raced through my mind. My resolve was cemented as I pulled into the parking lot. I had to defend myself. Henry was walking with a young man I knew from the photos that had been used against me, and I instinctively reached for my phone to record their conversation. I saw them passing an envelope back and forth, which the young man quickly tucked away in his wallet. The thought of how important what I had just recorded might be gave me a rush of adrenaline. I showed the video to Jacob at his office, and he responded immediately. His eyebrows shot up in horror as he watched the private conversation. "Isla, this is important." "It looks suspicious," Jacob suggested. "I think it's time we involve a senior investigator." Jacob immediately contacted his friend Wyatt, a senior investigator with years of experience, who kindly offered to take on the case. Wyatt wasted no time in finding the young man and finding out more about his background, and a few days later he called us into his office with an update. "I have spoken with the young man," Wyatt began in a serious tone. During our conversation, my phone rang with an email notice that contained my most recent blood test result. He revealed that he was a struggling actor who my spouse had hired to pretend to be someone close to me. He also revealed that everything, including drugging me, had been planned by my spouse. "This is the proof we require, Isla." Jacob took my phone and looked up, his face hardening with resolve as he read the data. "Not only can we defend you with this, but we can also effectively confront Henry." He suggested that we keep everything secret until the court date to surprise Henry. My heart skipped a beat when I opened the file and saw that Wyatt's findings were confirmed positive for a strong sedative. A week after the event, I was back at my lingerie shop trying to distract myself from the impending court hearing, and it was just another typical afternoon until Henry arrived and introduced me to his new fiancée, Nova. His eyes did not smile as he spoke of their engagement, and Nova, who appeared too young and perhaps unaware of Henry's true nature, gave me a questioning but doubtful look. I wanted to warn her, but I remembered Jacob's advice to remain silent until the hearing, so I just smiled quietly and said, "We'll see what the judge decides, Henry." Henry kept making fun of me by saying he'd take over my store, and Nova grew skeptical. The date of the court was earlier than expected, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as Henry, speaking for himself, boldly straightened his tie before making his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in a steady, convincing voice, "you will see a woman's true nature today." Henry stood in front of the court, accusing his wife Isla of breaking their marital vows and attempting to harm their family's reputation by acting dishonestly. As he showed the pictures on the screen behind him, the audience mumbled as he claimed that Isla had broken her vow of faithfulness. After several agonizing months of suspecting Isla of disloyalty, with the photographic evidence now on display confirming his worst fears, Henry stopped abruptly to allow the audience to comprehend the gravity of his revelations, and he approached me, sitting down and looking at me. "Isla presented herself as an innocent victim caught in a bad situation," Henry said, but his caustic tone and well-chosen words conveyed a different message, making a strong case that Isla was the cause of their marriage's breakdown rather than a victim. His performance was well planned, with deliberate pauses and acerbic glances at the judge. Delivered with the precision of a seasoned attorney, he asserted that Isla's actions had not only damaged their marriage irreparably, but also weakened the basic trust that underlies all relationships. As his speech reached a dramatic climax, Henry made a passionate plea for justice. Jacob, Eastlaw's lawyer, on the other hand, stood composedly, his suitcase brimming with the evidence that would prove Eastlaw's case, and he shifted the topic by addressing the court sternly and authoritatively, defending Isla's integrity and exposing the dishonest actions of her husband Henry. The courtroom drama took a significant turn when he gestured to the back of the room and a Henry-hired actor entered, shocking the audience with his hesitant admission that he had been cast for a role he initially thought was a practical joke when Jacob asked him to explain his involvement. The seriousness of the situation only became apparent to me when Jacob presented the blood test results in court, which showed that Isla had been drugged with chemicals she did not know she was taking and put into a coma without her consent. The courtroom was filled with whispers as everyone began to realize how serious the accusations were. Then, with a firm tone, Jacob explained that Mr. Clark had used such dishonest tactics before, that evidence from Henry's previous marriages, which he meticulously detailed, showed a pattern of behavior that had consistently brought Henry wealth at the expense of his former wives, and that the effect of the evidence was apparent when Jacob wrapped up his arguments. The judge carefully considered the facts and decided in favor of Isla, nullifying the prenuptial agreement and dismissing the false accusations against her. He also asked the court to fairly compensate Isla for the suffering she had endured. We won the case, and Isla was vindicated, which made me cry. Henry's face turned white as the judge awarded him Isla 610 in damages, his future ruined before his eyes, and his fiancée returned from his hasty departure from the courthouse to thank me for revealing the truth before leaving him for good. The trial's dramatic facts made headlines, and news of it spread swiftly. After learning of this, Henry's former wives were prompted to sue him, revealing a pattern of dishonesty that left him socially and financially destitute. One evening, as I locked up my office and watched the sunset cast long shadows on the floor, I reflected on the experience. Henry's reputation at work fell when his legal practice license was revoked. Even though it had been a challenging fight, filled with humiliation and despair at times, it demonstrated perseverance and the determination to bring about justice.